Tonight, the all too familiar images in this country terrified children running for their lives during another deadly school shooting.
They reported an active shooter in a high school.
The calls for help coming just after 9 a.m. at the Central Visual and Performing Arts High School in St. Louis. One student live streaming from inside a classroom.
It's the police! Okay.
Just as police arrived,
Everybody line up in a single file line, okay?
and guided them to safety.
I seen my friend have all blood on her hand, and it was like she seen the shooter, and the shooter came to her and said, "You ready to die?"
Worried parents racing to the school.
When we got here, I just started hearing shots, and they just made us get down, and they told us to get away from the scene. So she was communicating with me inside and letting me know that everything is okay.
Here it is all over again. Another active shooter, this time at a high school in the St. Louis area. It's the 257th active shooter moment this year already, and 2 people have died in this particular one. Apparently a teacher and also a young girl. So there's more details about what happened in the aftermath of this whole shooting situation. Let's watch more.
Police say the suspect was armed with a long gun and killed one adult woman and a teenage girl before police killed him on the 3rd floor. Police insist the school doors were locked, but they did not reveal how the suspect got inside.
The security staff did an outstanding job identifying the suspect's efforts to enter and immediately notified other staff.
Students checking on each other and reuniting with parents at a nearby parking lot.
Our children shouldn't have to experience this.
The FBI and ATF now assisting with the investigation. And David, authorities just a short time ago identified the gunman as 19-year-old Orlando Harris. They say he graduated from this school last year and lived with his parents. An exact motive remains under investigation.
Let's get to more details. I want you guys to pay attention to the tone of what they are talking about, the police and the response as we go through these details, because it's a little bit of a head nod to previous shootings. So again, as I said at the end of that report, the gunman was 19 years old and his name was Orlando Harris. He shot 61-year-old woman and a 16-year-old girl at that school. So what the police department commissioner Mike Sack said in his news briefing. The gunman graduated from the school, as they also pointed out, and he has no prior criminal history. Remember that as well. He had almost a dozen 30-round high-capacity magazines on him, though. And that one teacher victim, she was the physical education teacher. Authorities have not released the names of the woman and the teenage girl who died, but relatives of that woman identified her to the Post-Dispatch as 61-year-old Jean Kuzka, who taught health and physical education, and she lived in Dittmer. Here's an image of her, probably at the end of an event, a bike riding event. And she was lost in the school shooting. So the gunman came to her classroom, which was room 323. And she went in front of him to protect the students, is what her daughter was told. It wasn't immediately clear why the gunman went to her room or if he even targeted a certain teacher. Here's some more about Orlando Harris. He graduated from the school and he has no prior criminal history, as they also said. He lives locally with his family, and ATF officers were on the scene of his residence on Monday. And officers located that the gunman's vehicle was near the school and removed some evidence from it as well. At this point, I'm thinking, well, there was 2 victims here. What happened here with the long gun and the rifle and 30 magazine clips and everything that he had. Sack described a rapid law. This is the part where you should think about what they've done with other school shootings. Sack described a rapid law enforcement response to the incident early on Monday. They received a call for an active shooter at 9:11 a.m. and officers arrived 4 minutes later and immediately entered the school, where students informed the officers there was a shooter armed with a long gun. They ran to the sound of the shots, exchanged gunfire with the shooter, and shot him on the 3rd floor. According to the timeline provided by police, officers shot the gunman less than 15 minutes after the initial call came in. Now, 8 people, including the gunman, were taken to the hospital. The woman, the teacher, died at the hospital, and the girl died at the school, and the suspect also died at the hospital. Now, officers were still in the process of notifying these victims' families on Monday. Is also what the Sack said there, and he wasn't able to identify the others that were injured as well. So Schuster, there's a couple things here. And maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, or maybe it highlights what happened before. Specifically, I'm thinking Uvalde. And the point sometimes when they're saying the call came at 9/11. 4 minutes later, 4 minutes after we got there, we were into the school. Went towards the sounds of the gunshots. 15 minutes after they called us, everything was situated and handled, and we had the whole thing resolved and done. So maybe there's this bit of a fire being lit under responding authorities in anything like this to make sure they're not mimicking the moves or the inaction of many of those authorities down in Uvalde, as we saw, and it's been blowing up ever since.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think my concern is that, like Uvalde, sometimes the initial information can be wrong. So sure, the police say that they responded within 4 minutes, that they got the gunman neutralized or whatever term they're going to use within 15 minutes. That's all well and good if in fact that's how it turned out it really happened. Sometimes police tend to give themselves more credit initially. And sometimes that misleads the public. So we'll see. But look, it sounds like police were far more aggressive and responsive. I still just wonder though, JR, look, 4 minutes, 15 minutes, somebody with a long gun, with a high capacity magazine, they can still kill a lot of people. And I suppose it's a miracle that more people were not killed. And oh, by the way, the 30-round magazines, those are the sort of things that Congress has proposed banning, but still refuses to do so.
I'm glad you brought that up because there was a couple of instances of that as well. The magazine size, and then also he had no criminal history. So we still go off of this thing where, hey, criminals are the ones who have guns and run up and start doing things like this until they were not criminals right before their first criminal act. This happens a lot of times, especially when it comes to younger folks like this. He just graduated the year before. He's 19 years old. Who knows what his motivations were at this point? But if there's just it's a little bit more tough to access this level of weaponry and this type of bullets and magazines that you can carry at the age that you are. I get people want to push to 21. This kid was 19. Maybe some things like this get limited because it's not always just, those guys that have a rap sheet as long as a CVS receipt, they must be the guys every time. Not every time. In fact, many of these shootings not.
Yeah, I just wish we cared about our kids as much as so many people seem to care about protecting the Second Amendment, right? Because look, here where I live, our kids have to go through lockdown drills probably every couple of months in school, and they've sort of just gotten used to it. And there was a swatting episode in our state where people were calling in prank calls, claiming that there were mass shootings, and police were having to respond to all these different schools, and schools are put on lockdown for no reason. That was a prank. But this is the kind of thing that our kids are having to go through now. They're almost sort of used to the idea that, oh yeah, there might be bad people who might shoot up our school. Well, no kid should have to think that way. No kid should have to sort of get used to the idea that maybe at some point they're going to need to hide in the closet and use a pee bag because they can't go to the bath. It's insane what the message that we're sending to our kids in all of this.
Yeah, and the talks about cutting education. Look what they're teaching kids. They're teaching kids that they're gonna have to run for their lives one day because they just might have to run for their lives one day. I hope anyone else out there, you never have to experience this.